The digital clock on the dashboard read 3:47 a.m. when I pulled out of the Safeway parking lot for the last time. My hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. In the back seat, hidden under a blanket, sat 2 garbage bags containing everything I could grab in the 43 minutes Gary had been asleep. 43 minutes to erase 32 years of my life. My name was Elaine Brooks. Was. Past tense. In 6 hours, when I crossed the state line into Nevada, that woman would cease to exist. The streets of Portland were empty at this hour, just the occasional streetlight casting long shadows across the wet pavement. It had been raining earlier, and the air smelled like wet asphalt and pine trees. I forced myself to breathe slowly in through my nose, out through my mouth, just like Sandra from the support group had taught me. When you feel the panic rising, she'd said, remember that fear is just your body trying to protect you. Use it. Let it keep you sharp. But I wasn't just afraid. I was terrified in a way I'd never been before, not even during the worst of Gary's rages, because this time, if he found me, there would be no coming back from it. He'd told me as much 3 weeks ago, standing in our kitchen with that look in his eyes, the one that meant he was past anger and into something colder, something more dangerous. You think you can leave me, he'd said, his voice barely above a whisper. You think there's anywhere you could go that I wouldn't find you? I believed him then. I still believed him now, which was why I was taking the back roads instead of the interstate, why I'd paid cash for everything, why I'd left my phone on the kitchen counter still plugged into the charger so he'd think I was still in the house when he woke up. The plan was simple, at least on paper. Drive to Reno, meet Carmen at the address she'd given me, get the new documents, become someone else. Simple. Except nothing about leaving your entire life behind at 69 years old is simple. Nothing about running from a man who'd spent 3 decades learning every pattern of your behavior, every habit, every weakness is simple. I turned onto Highway 26, heading east toward Mount Hood, my heart hammering against my ribs. The sky was just starting to lighten at the edges, that deep blue-black giving way to something softer. Dawn was coming, and with it, Gary would wake up. He'd roll over, reach for me out of habit, find the bed empty. He'd call my name, wait for an answer that wouldn't come. And then he'd see the note I'd left on the bathroom mirror. 4 words that had taken me 20 minutes to write. I can't do this. Not I'm leaving you, not it's over. Just enough to make him think I'd finally done what he'd always said I was too weak to do. Let him think I'd driven to the Columbia River Gorge, parked at Vista House like I sometimes did when I needed to think. Let him imagine I'd stepped over the railing, let the weight of all those years pull me down into the water below. It was cruel, maybe, but cruelty was all I had left to work with. My name is Elaine Brooks, and before you hear the rest of this story, I need you to understand something. I need you to know that I'm telling you this not for sympathy, not for judgment, but because there are women out there right now, sitting in their houses, listening to footsteps in the hallway, and calculating whether they have time to lock the bathroom door. Women who think they're too old to start over, that it's too late to run, that no one would believe them anyway, because their husband is such a nice man at church, such a good provider, such a pillar of the community. I'm telling you this because I was that woman, and if you're listening to this, if you've stayed with me this far, then maybe you need to hear what happened next. But first, I need to ask you something. If you're finding value in this story, if it's speaking to something in your own life, or if you simply want to support real stories of real women finding their strength, please take just 1 second to hit that like button. It might seem small, but it helps this story reach other women who need to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Click that bell so you don't miss the stories we share here. These are real accounts, real struggles, and your support helps us bring them to light. Also, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment with your city or country. It means the world to know there's a community here, that we're not alone in this. Thank you for being here. Now let me take you back to where this all began. I was born Elaine Patricia Morrison on March 15, 1954, in a two-bedroom house on the outskirts of Eugene, Oregon, the middle child, sandwiched between two brothers who my father actually wanted. My mother used to joke that I was the surprise nobody ordered, but there was always a sharp edge to that joke, a truth hiding underneath the laughter that I understood even as a little girl. Eugene in the 1950s and 60s was a lumber town, the kind of place where the smell of sawdust was so constant you stopped noticing it, where the economy rose and fell with timber prices, and where men worked with their hands and came home tired and smelling of wood and sweat. My father, Robert Morrison, worked at Weyerhaeuser Mill for 37 years, coming home every evening at 6:15 exactly, expecting dinner on the table by 6:30. My mother, Dorothy, had been a teacher before she married, but that ended the day she said, "I do," in 1950. That's just how it was back then. You got married, you had babies, you kept house. Nobody questioned it, or if they did, they didn't say so out loud. We lived in a neighborhood where every house looked essentially the same. Small ranch-style homes with neat front lawns, single-car garages, and the kind of white picket fences that people actually had back then, not as a cliché, but as a real thing. Our street, Pinewood Avenue, was lined with Douglas firs and filled with kids who played kick the can until the streetlights came on. I was 7 years old when I first understood what fear felt like in your own home. My father had come home angry about something at the mill, some dispute with a foreman, and my mother had made the mistake of asking him about it while he was trying to read the newspaper. I remember sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, my pencil frozen over a long division problem, as I watched him stand up slowly from his chair. The newspaper crumpled in his fist, the vein in his temple pulsing. He didn't hit her that time. He didn't have to. The way he stood there, looming over her while she got smaller and smaller in her chair, her apology tumbling out in a rush of words, that was enough. I learned right then that violence didn't always need fists. Sometimes it was just the threat, the possibility, the understanding that it could happen if you stepped too far out of line. My mother never complained. She went to church every Sunday, belonged to the ladies' auxiliary, made casseroles for sick neighbors, and smiled that tight smile that I now recognize as the universal expression of women who've learned to swallow everything they really want to say. Looking back, I can see she was probably depressed, probably scared, probably about 1,000 things I didn't have words for as a child. But in 1961, you didn't talk about things like that. You just got on with it. My older brother, Tom, was the golden child, athletic, outgoing, the kind of boy who'd grow up to take over the family legacy at the mill. My younger brother, David, was the baby, pampered and protected. And me? I was the one who learned to be invisible, to read the room, to gauge my father's mood by the way he closed the front door when he came home. Soft click meant safe. Heavy slam meant hide. I went to Willamette High School, graduated in 1972, with decent grades and no real plans. College wasn't discussed. My father's view on higher education for girls was simple. Why waste the money? She'll just get married anyway. My mother had nodded along, her hands busy with her knitting, her eyes carefully blank. So instead I got a job at Woolworth's downtown, working the cosmetics counter, selling lipsticks and face powder to women who came in looking for a little brightness in their ordinary lives. I was good at it, actually. I had a knack for knowing what colors would work on different skin tones, for making small talk that felt genuine, for remembering regular customers' names and asking about their grandkids. It was at Woolworth's on a Tuesday afternoon in October of 1973 that I met Gary Allen Brooks. He came in looking for a birthday present for his mother, he said, and he seemed so lost standing there among all those glass cases full of feminine things that I took pity on him. He was 26, 3 years older than me, tall and solid with dark hair and an easy smile. He worked construction, he told me, building houses in the new development going up on the east side of town. He was polite, respectful. He called me ma'am even though I was younger than him, and when I suggested the Chantilly perfume for his mother, he bought it without hesitation, along with a matching powder compact. Then he asked if I'd like to get coffee sometime. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He seemed nice, stable, the kind of man my father would approve of. A working man, a man's man, someone who knew how to fix things, build things, provide. We dated for 8 months before he proposed, and during those 8 months, I thought I was the luckiest girl in Eugene. Gary took me to the movies, to dinner at the new steakhouse on 7th Avenue, to the county fair where he won me a stuffed bear by knocking down bottles with a baseball. He opened doors for me, pulled out my chair at restaurants, told me I was pretty when I wore the blue dress he liked. There were small things, sure, little moments that made something in my stomach tighten, like the time he got angry because the waitress at the diner forgot to bring his coffee refill, and I watched his jaw clench, his knuckles go white around his fork. Or the way he'd sometimes grip my elbow just a little too hard when we were walking, steering me away from groups of men on the sidewalk, his fingers leaving small bruises I'd find later. Or how he didn't seem to like me spending time with my girlfriends from work, always finding reasons why we should do something else instead when I mentioned plans with them. But I explained these things away. He was protective, that's all. He loved me. He didn't want to share me with other people because what we had was special. The bruises were accidents. He was a big man. He didn't know his own strength. The anger about the coffee? Well, he'd worked a double shift. He was tired. Anyone would be irritable. I was 23 years old, and I didn't know yet that love shouldn't hurt, shouldn't make you walk on eggshells, shouldn't require you to constantly calibrate your words and actions to avoid setting off a bomb. You couldn't see, but could always feel ticking. We got married on June 22nd, 1974, at First Presbyterian Church in Eugene, with my mother crying happy tears, and my father looking relieved to have me off his hands. Gary wore a rented tuxedo, and I wore my mother's wedding dress, altered to fit my smaller frame. We honeymooned for a long weekend at Crater Lake, staying in a cabin that smelled like pine and mossballs, and I remember thinking as I looked out at that impossibly blue water that this was it. This was the beginning of my real life. I had no idea I'd just signed a contract for 32 years of carefully managed terror. The first time Gary hit me was 3 months after the wedding. We were living in a small apartment on Oak Street. Nothing fancy, but it was ours, and I'd made the mistake of buying the wrong brand of beer at the grocery store. He'd asked for Budweiser, and I'd come home with Coors because it was on sale, and I was trying to stretch our budget since money was tight. He looked at the six-pack I set on the counter, looked at me, and something shifted in his expression. It was like watching a door close, all the warmth and light suddenly gone, replaced by something cold and flat. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming, just felt the explosion of pain across my left cheek, tasted blood where my teeth cut into the inside of my mouth. I stumbled backward against the refrigerator, my hand flying up to my face, tears already streaming down my cheeks. He stood there for a moment, breathing hard, his fist still raised like he might hit me again. Then his face crumpled. He rushed forward, grabbed my shoulders, started apologizing in this broken voice I'd never heard from him before. He was so sorry he didn't know what came over him. Work had been so stressful. His boss was writing him about deadlines. He'd never do it again. Please forgive him, please. He loved me so much. He'd die if I left him. And I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. Because that's what I'd been taught. That men got angry sometimes. That it was my job to keep the peace. That marriage was forever for better or worse. And this was just the worst part we had to get through. I told myself it was a one-time thing, an aberration. The beer incident, I started calling it in my head. Like it was something minor, something we could laugh about someday, except it happened again 6 weeks later. and then a month after that, and then with increasing frequency until I stopped being surprised by it and started just trying to survive it. The thing about abuse is that it doesn't happen all at once. It's not like someone flips a switch and suddenly you're living in hell. It's incremental. A slow erosion of boundaries, of self-worth, of the ability to trust your own judgment. First it's controlling what beer you buy. Then it's criticizing how you dress. Then it's isolating you from friends. Then it's monitoring where you go and who you talk to. And before you know it, you're living in a cage you helped build, bar by bar, concession by concession. By 1976, we'd moved to Portland because Gary got a better paying job with a construction company there. I should have been excited. Portland was bigger, more opportunities, a fresh start. But I knew the truth. A new city just meant I'd be even more isolated, even further from the few people who might notice if something was wrong. We rented a house in the Woodstock neighborhood, a small bungalow with a front porch and a backyard full of overgrown blackberry bushes. I got a job at a local library, shelving books and helping patrons find what they needed, and I loved it. Loved the quiet, the order, the feeling that I was doing something useful. The library became my sanctuary, the only place where I could breathe, where I didn't have to be constantly alert to Gary's moods. But even that became a source of conflict. Gary didn't like me working, didn't like that I had somewhere to go every day that wasn't home waiting for him, didn't like that I talked to people, men specifically, even if all I was doing was helping them locate books about woodworking or fishing or whatever they needed. The accusations started around then. I was having an affair, he said, with the librarian who supervised me, a gentle 60-year-old man named Mr. Peterson, who'd been married to the same woman for 40 years, with the UPS driver who delivered packages to the library, with the guy who mowed the lawn outside. It didn't matter that none of it was true. Gary had decided I was untrustworthy, and that became the new reality we operated under. I quit the library in 1978. Gary said it would be better if I stayed home, focused on making our house nice, maybe thought about starting a family. I was 27 years old, and I'd already learned to make myself as small as possible, to agree with whatever kept the peace, to sacrifice piece after piece of myself on the altar of his fragile ego. We never had children. I told people it just didn't happen for us, shrugging it off like it was just one of those things. The truth was more complicated. Part of me desperately wanted a baby, wanted someone to love who would love me back unconditionally. But a larger part of me was terrified of bringing a child into our home, of having a witness to what happened behind our closed doors, or worse, of having another person for Gary to control and hurt. There were times I tried to leave. In 1981, I packed a suitcase while Gary was at work, fully intending to drive to my parents' house in Eugene and just stay there, figure it out from there. But when I got to their house and tried to explain, my mother just looked tired and my father looked disgusted. "You made your bed," my father said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "Now lie in it. That's what marriage is, Elaine. It's not always pretty, but you honor your vows." My mother walked me back to my car, her hand light on my arm, and for a moment I thought she might say something different, might offer me an escape route. Instead, she said, "All marriages have rough patches, honey. You just need to try harder. Figure out what sets him off and don't do those things. It gets easier." I drove back to Portland that same afternoon, unpacked my suitcase, and put it back in the closet. That was the last time I tried to leave for 28 years. The years blurred together after that. The 1980s became the 1990s, became the 2000s, became the 2010s. Gary's construction business did well, then struggled during the 2008 recession, then recovered. We moved twice more, each house a little nicer than the last, each one feeling more like a prison despite the upgraded kitchens and hardwood floors. To the outside world, we were fine, normal. Gary Brooks and his wife Elaine, that quiet couple from the Craftsman House on Maple Street. Gary coached Little League for the neighbors' kids. We went to barbecues in the summer. I volunteered at the food bank. We looked like everyone else. But behind our closed doors, I walked on eggshells that only got thinner with time. I learned to read Gary's moods in the set of his shoulders when he came through the door. I learned which topics were safe and which would trigger an explosion. I learned to hide money in small amounts. $20 here, $30 there, tucked into old books and winter coat pockets, just in case. I learned to clear my browser history, to delete text messages from the few friends I still had, to make sure the house was exactly how he liked it before he got home. I learned to survive, but I forgot how to live. And then, 3 years ago, something changed. It started with a bruise that wouldn't heal. Not from Gary. This one I'd given myself, bumping into the kitchen counter while making dinner. But it stayed purple and tender for weeks. And finally Gary told me to go to the doctor, probably because he was tired of hearing me wince every time I brushed against something. Dr. Sarah Chen was new to the practice, young and efficient, and she examined the bruise with practiced hands before ordering some blood work, just to be safe. When the results came back, she called me in for a follow-up appointment. "Your platelet count is low," she said, her dark eyes serious behind her glasses. "And there are some other irregularities I want to explore. I'm referring you to a hematologist." The hematologist, Dr. Raymond Pierce, ran more tests. A bone marrow biopsy that hurt worse than anything Gary had ever done to me. More blood draws, CT scans. And finally, on a gray Tuesday in November 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic when the whole world felt like it was ending anyway, he gave me the diagnosis: myelodysplastic syndrome, a bone marrow disorder. Not cancer exactly, but a precancerous condition that could become leukemia if left untreated. The treatment options were limited at my age: medications to manage symptoms, blood transfusions when needed, and if things got bad enough, a bone marrow transplant that I probably wouldn't survive. "How long?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Dr. Pierce hesitated. "It's hard to say. With treatment, many patients live for years. Without treatment..." He trailed off, but I understood. I was 66 years old, and for the first time in my adult life, I had to face the reality that my time was limited. Not in some abstract, far-off way, but in a concrete, clock-ticking, this is actually happening way. And sitting in that doctor's office, I had a thought that surprised me with its clarity. I did not want to die as Elaine Brooks. I did not want the last chapter of my life to be more of the same. More fear, more walking on eggshells, more Gary. I wanted to live. Really live. Even if I only had a few years left, I wanted them to be mine. That was the seed. The tiny crack in the wall I'd built around any thoughts of escape. And over the next 3 years, that crack would widen until the whole wall came tumbling down. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the warning signs, the moments that accumulated like drops of water until they became a flood I could no longer ignore. The first sign came in January 2021, 2 months after my diagnosis. I'd started attending a support group for people with blood disorders, meeting every Thursday evening at a community center downtown. Gary had grudgingly agreed to let me go, probably because he figured a bunch of sick people sitting around talking about their problems was harmless enough. The group was small, maybe 8 or 10 of us on any given week, and it was led by a social worker named Sandra Reeves, who had lost her sister to leukemia. Sandra was in her 50s, with short gray hair and kind eyes, and she had a way of making everyone feel heard, seen, valued. It was during the 3rd or 4th meeting that I really noticed how Sandra interacted with the group. She asked questions, but really listened to the answers. She validated people's fears without dismissing them. She offered resources and support without being pushy. And she never, not once, told anyone how they should feel or what they should do. That Thursday in January, I stayed after the meeting to help Sandra stack chairs, and we got to talking. Nothing deep at first, just casual conversation about the weather, the pandemic, how strange it was to be alive in such uncertain times. But then she asked me how I was really doing, and something in the way she asked it, the genuine concern in her eyes, made my throat tighten. "I'm fine," I said automatically, the lie so practiced it came out smooth. Sandra looked at me for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling she could see right through me. "Elaine," she said gently, "in all the weeks you've been coming here, you've talked about your diagnosis, your symptoms, your treatment plan, but you've never mentioned your family, your support system at home." My hand stilled on the chair I was holding. "My husband is very supportive," I heard myself say. "I didn't ask if he was supportive," Sandra said. "I asked about your support system. Those aren't always the same thing." I should have shut down the conversation right there. Should have smiled and changed the subject and got myself out of that community center before I said something I couldn't take back. Instead, I found myself asking, "How do you know the difference?" Sandra set down her stack of chairs and turned to face me fully. "Support makes you feel stronger, makes you feel capable of facing what's ahead. It doesn't make you smaller. It doesn't require you to pretend you're okay when you're not." She paused. "Does being with your husband make you feel stronger, Elaine?" I couldn't answer. The words stuck in my throat like stones. And in that silence, Sandra nodded, understanding passing across her face. "If you ever need to talk," she said, pulling a card from her purse and pressing it into my hand, "about anything, not just the support group stuff. My cell number's on there, day or night, okay?" I took the card, shoved it deep into my coat pocket, and drove home with my heart racing. That night, lying in bed next to Gary's sleeping form, I pulled the card out and looked at it in the dim light from the bathroom. Sandra Reeves, LCSW. A phone number with a Portland area code. I hid it in my jewelry box, under the tangle of costume earrings I never wore, and tried to forget about it. But I couldn't. That card became a small light in the darkness, a reminder that somewhere out there was a person who saw me, really saw me, and was offering help. I didn't call Sandra, not then, but I kept going to the support group, and I kept that card hidden in my jewelry box, and something small shifted inside me. The second sign came in April 2021. I'd had a particularly bad episode with my condition. Severe fatigue, bruising all over my arms and legs, bleeding gums that wouldn't stop. Dr. Pierce admitted me to the hospital for a blood transfusion and to adjust my medications. Gary visited me exactly once during my 4-day stay. He came on the second day, stayed for maybe 20 minutes, complained about how inconvenient it was that I was in the hospital during the week. He had a big project deadline, and left. He didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't hold my hand, didn't bring me anything from home, even though I'd asked him to bring my reading glasses and the book on my nightstand. But the nurses were kind, especially Carla, a night shift nurse probably in her early 30s, with bright red hair and a tattoo of a phoenix on her forearm. She'd come in to check my vitals around 2 or 3 in the morning, when the hospital was quiet and sleep was impossible, and she'd chat with me about nothing important. Her cat, the terrible coffee in the break room, the weird things people left behind in hospital rooms. On my last night there, Carla came in for the late-night vitals check and found me crying. I wasn't sobbing or making noise, just silent tears running down my face while I stared at the darkened window. "Hey," she said softly, setting down her equipment and pulling up a chair next to my bed. "What's going on?" "I'm being ridiculous," I said, wiping at my face with the scratchy hospital tissue. "I'm just tired." Carla didn't buy it. She sat there, quiet and patient, until I finally admitted, "My husband thinks I'm faking this or exaggerating. He told me I need to just push through, that his grandmother had arthritis and she never complained. Arthritis and myelodysplastic syndrome are not even remotely the same thing, Carla said, her voice taking on an edge. I know, but he doesn't see it that way. He thinks if I just tried harder, ate better, exercised more, I'd be fine. Carla was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. Elaine, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it, okay? Partners who minimize your health problems, who make you feel like your very real physical issues are somehow your fault or under your control. That's not support. That's control disguised as concern. I looked at her, this young woman who didn't know anything about my life beyond what she'd seen in these 4 days, and I wondered how she'd figured out in 96 hours what I'd spent 47 years refusing to acknowledge. There are resources, Carla continued, if you ever need them. Support groups, shelters, legal advocates. You don't have to... She stopped, seeming to choose her words carefully. You don't have to stay in a situation that makes you sicker, is all I'm saying. She left me her card too, though she crossed out the hospital number and wrote something else. A direct line to a women's resource center, she said, where they specialized in helping older women in difficult situations. 2 cards now. 2 lifelines I was too scared to grab. The third sign was in July 2021, and it was the most terrifying one yet, because it made me realize that Gary's control wasn't loosening as I got sicker. It was tightening. I'd made a friend at the support group, a woman named Margaret, who was a few years older than me and dealing with a different blood disorder. We'd started having coffee after the Thursday meetings, just 30 minutes or so at the Starbucks down the street, talking about our shared experiences and the weird medical terminology we were both trying to understand. It was innocent, completely, totally innocent. But it was mine, this small thing that belonged to me, this connection that had nothing to do with Gary or his needs or his moods. I made the mistake of mentioning it one Thursday evening when I got home. Gary was in the living room watching TV, and he asked why I was later than usual. Without thinking, I told him I'd stopped for coffee with a friend from the group. The silence that followed was the kind that makes your skin prickle. Gary muted the TV, turned to look at me. A friend, he repeated, his voice flat. Yes, Margaret. She's 71. Her husband died 2 years ago. She's dealing with... So you're making friends now, Gary interrupted. Making plans without telling me. Spending time with people I've never met. Gary, it's just coffee. 30 minutes after a support group for people with blood disorders. It's not... He stood up then, and even though he was across the room, I felt my body go rigid, preparing for impact. You know what I think? He said, walking towards me slowly. I think you're using this illness as an excuse. An excuse to go out, do whatever you want, meet whoever you want. And I'm just supposed to accept it because you're sick. That's not what I'm doing, I said, my voice coming out small and pleading in a way I hated. No more coffee, Gary said, stopping inches from me. I could smell the beer on his breath, could see the vein pulsing in his temple. No more making plans without asking me first. You want to see this Margaret woman? She can come here, where I can meet her, make sure she's appropriate company. I nodded, knowing that would never happen, that Gary would find fault with Margaret or any other friend I tried to bring into our home, and that this was just his way of ensuring I stayed isolated. And maybe, Gary continued, his voice dropping lower, maybe you should think about whether this support group is really helping you. Seems like all it's doing is putting ideas in your head, making you think you need things you don't need, people you don't need. That night, lying awake while Gary snored beside me, I understood what he was doing. He was tightening the cage because he sensed something shifting in me, some small rebellion he couldn't quite identify, but could definitely feel. And his response was to clamp down harder, to remind me of my place, to make sure I understood that being sick didn't give me any more freedom. It actually gave me less, because now I was dependent on him in new ways. I stopped having coffee with Margaret after the meetings, stopped mentioning the support group at all, just went on Thursdays, sat quietly, listened, and came straight home. But Margaret noticed, and one Thursday, she pulled me aside. "He won't let you have friends, will he?" she said, and it wasn't really a question. I didn't answer, which was answer enough. Margaret pressed a piece of paper into my hand. "I used to be married to a man like that," she said, "for 23 years, and then I wasn't anymore." She squeezed my hand. "When you're ready, not before. But when you're ready, call this number. It's a special division of legal aid. They help women like us, women our age, who everyone thinks should just be grateful to have someone taking care of them." 3 cards now, 3 pieces of a puzzle I didn't know how to put together. The 4th sign came on my 68th birthday in March 2023. Gary had forgotten it. Not unusual. He forgot most years. But what was different was that I didn't care. Usually, I'd feel hurt, diminished, proof that I didn't matter. This time, I felt something else entirely. Relief. Relief that he'd forgotten meant I didn't have to pretend to be grateful for whatever token gesture he'd made up. Relief meant I could just let the day pass quietly without fanfare or forced celebration. I treated myself instead. Stopped at the bakery on my way home from a doctor's appointment and bought myself a single cupcake, red velvet with cream cheese frosting, my favorite. Ate it in my car, in the parking lot, savoring each bite, and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something purely for my own pleasure, without calculating whether Gary would approve or how it might affect his mood. That small act of self-care, buying myself a birthday cupcake, felt revolutionary and terrifying. Because once you start remembering what it feels like to choose something for yourself, it gets harder to go back to having everything chosen for you. The 5th sign was in June 2023. My health had stabilized somewhat with the new medication protocol, and I was feeling better than I had in months, strong enough to start thinking about the future in a way I hadn't before, strong enough to start imagining alternatives. I'd started taking walks in the neighborhood, just 20 or 30 minutes in the early evening, telling Gary I needed the exercise for my circulation. Really, I needed the space, the breathing room, the chance to exist in the world without monitoring his presence. During one of these walks, I passed a house with a "for rent" sign in the yard. It was a small cottage, probably just 1 bedroom, with a front porch and a garden that needed tending. And I found myself stopping, staring at that sign, and thinking I could live there, alone, just me. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like possibility, like hope. I called the number on the sign from a payphone. Yes, there were still a few around. Got the details. The rent was manageable, or it would be if I had any income of my own, which I didn't. Gary controlled all our money, all our accounts. I had access to a debit card for groceries and household expenses, but he monitored every transaction. Still, the fact that I'd even made that call felt significant. A line crossed. The 6th sign happened in August 2023, and it was the one that finally pushed me from thinking about leaving to actually planning it. Gary had a business dinner with some potential clients, and he didn't want me there. This was normal. He rarely wanted me at his work events, said I made things awkward, didn't know how to talk to people. Fine. I was relieved to have an evening to myself. I decided to watch a movie, something I'd recorded weeks ago and hadn't had a chance to see. It was called The Escape, about a woman in her 60s who'd left an abusive marriage and started over in a new city. I know the irony wasn't lost on me, but watching that movie, seeing this fictional woman pack her bags and drive away and rebuild her life and find happiness, it did something to me. It made me realize that what I'd been thinking of as impossible might actually just be really, really difficult. which wasn't the same thing. The movie ended just as I heard Gary's car pull into the driveway. I quickly deleted it from the DVR, my heart pounding like I'd been caught doing something criminal. And maybe I had been in Gary's world. Maybe imagining freedom was the ultimate betrayal. That night, I pulled out all 3 cards I'd been hiding: Sandra's, Carla's, Margaret's legal aid contact. I looked at them spread out on my bathroom counter while Gary slept, and I made a decision. On Monday, while Gary was at work, I called Sandra. The 7th sign was actually a series of small moments throughout September and October 2023, after I'd started secretly meeting with Sandra and a legal advocate named Patricia, who specialized in late-life domestic abuse cases. I'd become a different kind of vigilant. Not the scared vigilance of trying to avoid Gary's anger, but the focused vigilance of someone planning an escape. I started documenting things, taking photos of bruises, saving text messages where Gary berated me or made threats, keeping a journal hidden in the garage behind old paint cans where I recorded incidents with dates and details. Patricia explained that in Oregon, I could file for divorce, and given my health condition and Gary's financial control, I'd likely be entitled to spousal support and a division of assets. But getting to that point safely, that was the challenge. "He'll fight you on everything," Patricia said during one of our secret meetings at the legal aid office. "Men like Gary don't let go easily. They'd rather burn everything down than see you have any independence." "I know," I said, and I did know, which is why I was planning something more drastic than just filing for divorce and hoping for the best. The 8th and final sign came in late October 2023. Gary's temper had gotten worse as he'd gotten older and his control more absolute. He'd retired from active construction work and was home most of the time now, which meant I had almost no freedom of movement, no privacy, no space to breathe. But he'd also gotten complacent. He didn't think I'd ever leave. Why would I? I was 69 years old, sick, with no money of my own, no family nearby who'd take me in, no work history from the last 45 years. Where would I go? What would I do? He was so certain of my helplessness that he'd stopped being careful in other ways. He'd leave his phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. He'd have conversations about his business finances on speakerphone where I could hear. He'd forget to log out of the computer where he kept all our important documents. And I took advantage of every single lapse. Photographed his phone contacts, saved business emails that showed he'd been hiding income, downloaded copies of our financial records, built a case, piece by piece, that would help ensure I got what I was legally entitled to when the time came. Patricia had been clear. The more documentation you have, the stronger your position. Don't just disappear and hope for the best. Disappear with leverage. So that's what I was doing. Building leverage while planning my escape. Sandra had connected me with a network. She called it an underground railroad for older women that helped women in my situation relocate safely, establish new identities, start over. It wasn't strictly legal in all its methods, but it wasn't strictly illegal either. It existed in a gray area where women's survival mattered more than bureaucratic procedure. The plan was this. I would leave in the middle of the night, driving to Reno, where a woman named Carmen would provide me with new identification documents. Not fake exactly, but legitimate papers under a different name, the kind used in witness protection programs. From there, I'd relocate to a pre-arranged apartment in a small town in New Mexico, where the cost of living was low and no one knew me or Gary. I'd file for divorce from there, using the documents I'd gathered as leverage to get a fair settlement without ever having to see Gary face to face. Patricia would handle everything remotely. It was audacious, possibly crazy, definitely risky. But staying was riskier. Staying meant dying slowly in a prison of Gary's making, my last years consumed by fear and smallness and regret. So on November 17, 2023, At 3:47 a.m., I backed out of our driveway for the last time, 2 garbage bags of belongings in my back seat, and a new life waiting somewhere on the other side of terror. The drive to Reno took about 9 hours with stops, and I spent every mile of it expecting to see Gary's truck appear in my rearview mirror, expecting him to somehow know, to chase me down, to drag me back. But the highway stretched empty behind me, and slowly, mile by mile, I started to believe I might actually make it. I'd left Gary that note, "I can't do this," deliberately vague. Sandra had suggested it, said it would buy me time if he thought I'd hurt myself. Cruel, yes. But Gary had been cruel to me for 32 years. I figured we were even. The countryside changed as I drove east. The green forests of Oregon giving way to the high desert of Nevada, all sage brush and vast sky. I stopped once at a rest area to use the bathroom and check my burner phone. Yes, I'd bought a prepaid phone weeks ago. Another detail of the plan. Sandra had texted, "Drive safe. Carmen will be ready." Carmen's apartment was in a slightly run-down complex on the edge of Reno, the kind of place where people minded their own business and didn't ask too many questions. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and the efficient manner of someone who'd done this many times before. "You're Elaine," she said when she opened the door, though it wasn't really a question. "Come in." Her apartment was neat and impersonal, like a hotel room lived in long term. She sat me down at her kitchen table and spread out a series of documents. "Here's how this works," Carmen said. "These are legitimate documents. Birth certificate, social security card, driver's license, all under a different name. The name is Sarah Mitchell. She was a real person born in 1954, same year as you, but she died of cancer in 2019. No living relatives. Her identity has been repurposed, we'll say." I stared at the documents. Sarah Mitchell, a stranger's name that would become mine. "I know it's a lot," Carmen said gently, "but these documents will allow you to rent an apartment, open a bank account, apply for Medicare under your new identity. You'll still be eligible for Social Security benefits based on your work history from before you were married, since those were under your birth name. Patricia has the paperwork to help you transition that once you're settled." "How much do I owe you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Carmen smiled. "It's already been covered. The network has donors, women who got out and now help others do the same." I felt tears prick my eyes. Strangers helping me escape. A whole network of women I'd never meet, all working together to save each other. Carmen spent the next 2 hours coaching me on my new identity. Sarah Mitchell had been a bookkeeper in Sacramento, had never married, had no children. She liked cats and crossword puzzles and classical music. Not so different from Elaine, really. Easy enough to slip into. "The hardest part," Carmen said, "is remembering to respond to the name. Practice saying it. Sarah Mitchell. Sarah. Someone calls Sarah across a room. You need to turn around automatically." So I practiced. Sat in that apartment in Reno repeating, "I'm Sarah Mitchell," until it started to feel almost true. That night, I slept in Carmen's spare bedroom, the first night in 32 years I'd gone to bed without calculating Gary's mood or planning tomorrow's survival strategy. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt untethered. Like I'd cut myself loose from an anchor, and now I was just drifting in open water. In the morning, Carmen drove me to a used car dealership where I traded my old Honda, registered in Gary's name, for a 10-year-old Toyota Corolla that I bought cash using money I'd been hiding for 3 years. Carmen helped me negotiate, helped me get a fair price, helped me transfer everything from one car to the other. "New Mexico is about 12 hours from here," Carmen said as we stood in the dealership parking lot, my new-to-me car packed and ready. "Don't drive straight through. Stop in Flagstaff, get a hotel for the night, rest. You've been through a lot." I hugged her then, this woman who'd given me a new life. "Thank you," I whispered. "I don't know how to thank you enough." "Live," Carmen said simply. "Live well. Be happy. That's how you thank us." The apartment in Deming, New Mexico, was small but clean. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room with a window that looked out over the desert landscape. The town itself had maybe 14,000 people, small enough that you could get to know the locals, but big enough that a new person didn't automatically attract attention. The rent was $450 a month, utilities included, paid for the first 3 months by the network while I got established. After that, I'd be on my own. But Patricia had assured me that with the divorce settlement and Social Security, I'd manage just fine. I moved in on November 20th, 2023. Thanksgiving was the following week, and I spent it alone in my apartment, eating a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store and watching the parade on TV. It should have been lonely. Instead, it felt like freedom. The divorce proceedings started in December. Patricia filed everything remotely, serving Gary through a process server. His response, according to Patricia, was exactly what we'd expected: rage, denial, threats to contest everything, claims that I was mentally incompetent due to my illness. But I had the documentation. Medical records showing I was of sound mind. Financial records showing he'd hidden income. Photos of bruises. The journal I'd kept. Text messages. A statement from Sandra about my participation in the support group and my clear understanding of my situation. Gary tried to find me. Patricia said he'd hired a private investigator, had called all my old friends and family members, not that there were many, had even filed a missing persons report claiming I'd been abducted or was wandering confused somewhere due to my medical condition. But Elaine Brooks had vanished. She'd driven to Vista House at the Columbia River Gorge on November 17th and never come back. Her car had been found in the parking lot 3 days later. There was a massive search. They dragged parts of the river. Eventually, they assumed she'd jumped, that the current had carried her body away, that she'd become another suicide statistic. Gary played the grieving husband for the cameras. Patricia showed me the news clips. There he was, tears in his eyes, talking about his beloved wife who'd struggled with her diagnosis, who'd been depressed, who he wished he could have saved. I watched those clips in my apartment in Deming and felt nothing, no pity, no guilt. Just a distant acknowledgement that this man was a stranger to me now, that Elaine Brooks really had died that November morning, and Sarah Mitchell had been born. The divorce finalized in March 2024. Because I'd been declared legally dead, it technically became a settlement of my estate, which worked in my favor. Patricia navigated all the legal complexities, and when the dust settled, I had enough money to live modestly but comfortably for the rest of my life. Gary never got closure, never got to know where I went or how I managed it, never got to have the last word or the final act of control. That not knowing, that permanent uncertainty, was my last gift to him. Let him wonder, let him doubt, let him spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder the way I'd had to. Starting over at 69 isn't easy, but it's possible. I had to learn that all over again, that I was possible. The first few months in Deming were spent mostly figuring out the basics of being Sarah Mitchell. I got a library card, of course I did, started volunteering at the local food bank, joined a book club that met every other Tuesday at the community center. Small steps. Normal life things that I'd been denied for so long. I made friends slowly. There was Rita, 73, who ran the book club and had the filthiest sense of humor I'd ever encountered in a woman her age. There was James, 65, a widower who volunteered at the food bank and who eventually asked me to dinner in such a sweet, nervous way that I said yes, even though I'd promised myself no relationships, no complications. That first dinner with James was terrifying. I kept waiting for him to show signs, the control, the anger, the possessiveness. But he just talked about his late wife with gentle affection, asked about my bookkeeping career in Sacramento, the backstory Carmen had given me, told me about his kids who lived in Arizona and didn't visit enough. When he dropped me off at my apartment and didn't try to come in, didn't get angry when I said I'd had a lovely time but wanted to take things slowly, I realized something important. Not all men were like Gary. I'd known that intellectually, but knowing it and believing it are different things. James and I have been seeing each other for about 8 months now. It's not serious, probably won't ever be. I'm not sure I'm capable of serious anymore, and that's okay. But it's nice. Having someone to see movies with, to share meals with, to talk to about nothing important. It's the kind of normal I never had with Gary. My health stabilized too, surprisingly. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, my new hematologist in Deming, said that stress can significantly impact conditions like mine, and the reduction in my stress levels might explain why my numbers had improved. I still have myelodysplastic syndrome. I still need monitoring and medication, but I'm not dying quite as fast as I thought I might be. I got a part-time job, eventually working at the library. It doesn't pay much, but I don't need much, and being surrounded by books all day makes me feel like I'm in exactly the right place. Mrs. Henderson, the head librarian, is 78 and has no plans to retire. "Why would I?" she said when I asked. "What else would I do with my time? Sit at home and wait to die? No thanks." I understand that completely now. I started seeing a therapist too, Dr. Michelle Torres, who specializes in trauma and domestic abuse. Medicare covers it, and I go every other week. It's hard work, unpacking 32 years of conditioning, learning to recognize patterns, understanding how I got to the point where disappearing was the only option I could see. "You're not running away," Dr. Torres said during one of our sessions. "You're running toward safety, toward yourself, toward the life you should have had all along." I liked that reframing. Running toward, not away. I haven't contacted my family. My parents are both dead now. My mother passed in 2015, my father in 2018, both while I was still with Gary. My brothers are alive, living their lives in Oregon, but we were never close. They knew things were difficult with Gary, but they subscribed to the same marriage is forever philosophy our father had drilled into us. Telling them I'm alive would just complicate things, might even put them in a position where they'd feel obligated to tell Gary if he ever asked. So Elaine Brooks stays dead, and Sarah Mitchell lives. It's been a year now, a full year since that 3:47 a.m. drive out of Portland. A year since I chose myself for the first time in my adult life. People sometimes ask me, well, Dr. Torres asks me if I regret not leaving sooner, and the honest answer is yes and no. Yes, I regret the years lost, the person I might have been if I'd gotten out in my 20s or 30s or even 40s, but no, I don't regret the timing because I don't know that I would have survived leaving earlier. I might not have had the resources, the network, the understanding of what I was dealing with. Everything happened when it was supposed to happen. That's what I tell myself anyway. I think about Gary sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. I wonder if he actually believes I'm dead or if some part of him knows the truth. I wonder if he ever thinks about the 32 years he had me trapped and feels any remorse, or if he's just angry that his possession escaped. Mostly, though, I don't think about him at all. He doesn't get to take up space in my head anymore. That space is mine now. The woman I was, Elaine Brooks, she existed, she survived, she endured. And when she couldn't endure anymore, she made one of the most courageous decisions a person can make. She chose to live. I'm proud of her, proud of me. I need to pause here and talk to you directly, because if you've listened this far, you've invested time in my story, and I want to honor that. If you found value in this, if it's resonated with you or made you think or given you hope, please take a moment to like this video. It seems like such a small thing, but it genuinely helps. It tells the algorithm that this story matters, that these experiences deserve to be heard, and if you haven't subscribed yet, I hope you will. There are so many stories like mine, stories of women who found their strength later in life, who refused to let their stories end in silence. Every subscription, every bit of support, helps ensure these stories reach the women who need to hear them most. Finally, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment telling me what you thought, or just let me know what city or country you're watching from. It means more than you know to understand that there's a community here, that we're not alone in this. Thank you. Truly. Now let me tell you what I've learned from all of this. If there's anything I want you to take away from my story, it's this. It is never ever too late to save your own life. I was 69 years old when I left. 69. I had a serious medical condition, no money of my own, no recent work history, and a husband who'd spent 3 decades making sure I believed I had no options, and I still found a way out. If you're sitting there right now, listening to this, thinking, but I'm too old, or it's too late for me, or I've been here too long to leave now, I'm telling you that's a lie. A lie that whoever is controlling you wants you to believe because it keeps you trapped. You are not too old. It is not too late. You have more options than you think you do. Here's what I learned. 1. Leaving doesn't have to look the way you think it does. I didn't file for divorce and move across town. I disappeared and started over with a new identity in a new state. That's extreme, I know. But the point is, there are paths out that you haven't considered, resources you don't know exist, people who will help you in ways that would surprise you. 2. Don't wait for the right time, because there is no right time. There's just the moment when you decide that staying is more dangerous than leaving. I waited 32 years for the right time. Know what finally made me leave? The realization that I was running out of time, period. That if I didn't leave now, I'd die as Elaine Brooks, trapped, scared, small, and I couldn't let that be my ending. 3. You need a network. I couldn't have done this alone. I needed Sandra, Carmen, Patricia, Margaret, Carla, all these women who saw me, believed me, and helped me. If you're isolated, if your abuser has cut you off from friends and family, find a support group. Call a domestic violence hotline. Find one person who can be your lifeline. Just one. That's where it starts. 4. Document everything. I know it's scary. I know it feels like you're betraying your partner or being paranoid or making things worse. But if you ever want legal recourse, if you ever want what you're legally entitled to, you need proof. Photos of injuries, saved text messages, a journal with dates and details, bank statements, whatever you can safely gather and hide. 5. Money is power. I started hiding $20 here, $30 there, years before I actually left. By the time I escaped, I had enough to buy a used car cash and survive the first few months. If you can, squirrel away whatever you can. Return things for cash. Sell items he won't notice are gone. Ask for cash back at the grocery store and hide it. Every dollar is a piece of your future freedom. 6. Your abuser is counting on you not believing you deserve better. He's counting on you thinking this is normal, or that you caused it, or that you're too damaged for anyone else to want. Those are lies. All lies. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. You deserve to go to bed at night without fear. You deserve to live. 7. Surviving isn't the same as living. I survived for 32 years. I'm only now learning to live. Don't waste decades just surviving when you could be living. Please. 8. Getting out doesn't mean getting revenge. I'm not telling this story because I want you to admire how I got back at Gary. I'm telling it because I want you to understand that escape is possible, that starting over is possible, that you can build a life on the other side of trauma. What that looks like for you will be different than what it looked like for me. And that's okay. There's no one right way to leave. There's just leaving. 9. You might have to grieve the person you thought you married. Gary wasn't always terrible. Or maybe he was, and I just didn't see it clearly because I was young and naive. Either way, I had to mourn the loss of the life I'd imagined, the marriage I'd hoped for, the man I'd thought I was building a future with. That grief is real and valid. Let yourself feel it, but don't let it trap you. 10. You are stronger than you know. I promise you this is true. You've survived every single day up until now. You've endured things that would break other people. You've found ways to cope, to manage, to keep going when it would have been easier to give up. That strength doesn't go away when you leave. It just finally gets to work for you instead of against you. I'm 70 years old now. I've been Sarah Mitchell for just over a year. And I'm happier now in my small apartment in Deming, New Mexico, with my part-time library job and my book club and my maybe boyfriend James, than I ever was in any of the nice houses I lived in with Gary. Because here's the thing they don't tell you. Happiness isn't about what you have. It's about how free you are to be yourself. I have less now than I've ever had. Less money, less space, less stuff. But I have more of myself, more autonomy, more peace, more joy, more hope. I get to decide what I eat for dinner, what time I go to bed, what I watch on TV, whether I want to go out or stay in, who I spend time with, how I spend my days. These seem like such small things, such trivial freedoms. But when you've spent 3 decades having every single choice controlled or criticized or weaponized against you, being able to choose feels like flying. I sleep well now. I don't wake up every hour checking to make sure Gary's still asleep, that I haven't accidentally done something to set him off. I don't spend my days calculating and calibrating my behavior to avoid triggering his anger. I don't flinch when someone walks up behind me. I don't apologize reflexively for things that aren't my fault. I'm relearning how to be a person, how to have opinions, how to say no, how to take up space. It's hard sometimes. There are days when the old programming kicks in, when I catch myself about to apologize to James for something completely normal, or when I panic because I made a decision without checking if it's okay with someone else first. Those moments remind me how deep the damage goes, how long it will take to fully undo 32 years of conditioning. But those moments are getting fewer, and in between them there are stretches of just normal life, good life, the life I should have had all along. If you're in a situation like I was, and I know some of you listening are, I can feel it. Please hear me. You don't have to stay. You don't have to wait until you're 69 and running out of time. You don't have to lose decades of your life to someone else's anger and control. But also hear this. If you are 69 or 75 or 80 and you're thinking it's too late for you, it's not. I'm living proof. It is never too late to save yourself. Here are some resources that helped me, and I hope they can help you. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. They have advocates available 24/7 who can help you create a safety plan, find local resources, and figure out your options. They also have online chat if you can't safely make a phone call. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence has a specific program for older women experiencing abuse. They understand that leaving looks different when you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s, and they have resources specifically tailored to our age group. Legal aid services in your state can help you understand your rights regarding divorce, property division, and spousal support. Many have sliding scale fees or pro bono services for people with limited income. Your local area agency on aging can connect you with services for older adults, including sometimes emergency housing, legal assistance, and case management. And please, if you have friends or family you can trust, reach out. I know it's scary. I know you think they won't believe you or will tell you to just work it out or will think less of you. But you might be surprised. People want to help. They just need to know you need help. I want to end by saying thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for staying with me through all of this, for hearing me, for bearing witness to what I went through and what I survived. Before I go, I want to ask one more thing of you. If this story touched you, if it gave you hope or made you think or helped you understand something about your own life, please like this video. Please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss other stories like mine. And please comment. Tell me what you thought. What resonated with you? What city or country you're watching from? Your engagement doesn't just help this channel grow. It helps these stories reach the women who desperately need to hear them. We're building a community here, a space where women's stories of survival and strength are valued and shared and celebrated. You're part of that. Thank you for being part of it. My name is Sarah Mitchell, but it used to be Elaine Brooks. And if Elaine could see me now, free, safe, living on my own terms, I think she'd be proud. I think she'd say it was worth it. Every scary moment of that drive to Reno, every difficult day of building a new life from scratch, every time I had to remember to answer to a new name, it was worth it. You are worth it too. Whatever it takes to get free, whatever difficult path you have to walk to get there, you are worth it. It's never too late to start living. I promise you that. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, you're stronger than you think. You have more options than you know. And you deserve better than what you're settling for. This has been my story. Thank you for listening. And if you're ready to hear more stories like this, I'll see you in the next video.